amid the chrome-veined corridors of Seoul's Gangnam district, where the air hummed with the low thrum of venture capital deals and the faint ozone scent of innovation labs. A single voice cut through the din like a scalpel through silk. It belonged to Elias Kwon, the reclusive oracle of global branding, whose firm had sculpted empires from the ether, turning fledgling startups into household gods and luxury houses into cultural cathedrals. At the annual Asia Brand Summit, under chandeliers that mimicked fractured constellations, he paused mid-keynote, his silver cufflinks glinting like distant stars, and uttered words that would cascade into a digital maelstrom. In an era of manufactured allure, Kim Taehyung doesn't perform authenticity, he inhabits it, reshaping desire itself. The auditorium, packed with executives nursing overpriced lattes, fell into a hush fractured only by the collective intake of breath. Outside, on flickering screens across the Pacific, netizens froze mid-scroll, their feeds igniting with the raw voltage of revelation. Elias Kwon was no stranger to the alchemy of icons. At 58, with a mane of steel-gray hair swept back like the prow of a ship cutting Arctic swells, he had engineered the rebirth of Chanel's millennial pivot and whispered the secrets of Supreme Street to Savile Row ascent. His lectures were pilgrimages for the ambitious, laced with parables drawn from the underbelly of consumer psychology. How a logo could evoke the ache of lost summers, or a tagline summon the ghost of unrequited youth. Yet on this crisp December morning in 2025, as winter's first sleet tapped insistently against the venue's floor-to-ceiling glass, Kwon's gaze lingered on a projected still from Paradise City's nascent campaign. A silhouette of Taeyong, poised at the edge of an infinity pool, his profile ablaze against the bruised purple horizon of Incheon Bay. It was more than endorsement fodder, it was invocation, a portal to the intangible hungers that drove empires. Taeyong himself had arrived at Paradise City under the veil of pre-dawn fog, the resort's spires rising like a mirage from Yeongjong Island's reclaimed sands, their facades a mosaic of smoked glass and verdant atria that blurred the line between sanctuary and spectacle. He was 29 now, the velvet timbre of his voice still echoing from layover's languid confessions, yet the weight of solitude had etched faint tributaries at the corners of his eyes, lines that cameras adored but mirrors mocked in quiet hours. The ambassador role had landed like a velvet gauntlet. Paradise, that gilded enclave of high-stakes roulette and hydrotherapy havens, sought not just a face but a frequency, someone whose mere presence could transmute opulence into aspiration. Taeyong, with his penchant for framing existential drifts in jazz-inflected murmurs, fit the cipher perfectly. He stepped from the chauffeured Bentley, collar turned against the chill, and into a whirlwind of pre-production, mood boards strewn with Caravaggio shadows and Basquiat scrawls, stylists debating the tensile poetry of linen versus leather. The set pulsed with controlled chaos, a symphonic sprawl of 200 egos orbiting the director's chair. Ray, with his salt-flecked beard and the perpetual squint of a man decoding hieroglyphs, orchestrated the ballet, cameras prowling like panthers through the Wonderbox Theater's labyrinthine curves, where metallic petals unfurled to reveal velvet-seated alcoves humming with phantom orchestras. Taeyong navigated it with the innate grace of a tightrope artist schooled in spotlights, his laughter a counterpoint to the rig's hydraulic sighs. "If this pool drowns me before lunch," he quipped to a gaffer wrestling with underwater housings, "at least I'll go out looking like a Renaissance painting, minus the fruit flies." The crew dissolved into grins, the tension of dawn calls evaporating like dew. It was his slight, this infusion of levity into the ledger of labor, a deflection that masked the marrow-deep fatigue of a schedule etched in bioluminescent ink. Dawn fittings for Cartier's lunar phase, midday vocal warm-ups for a spectral single, evenings surrendered to script dissections that peeled back his psyche like onion skins. Beneath the choreography lurked a subtler negotiation. Paradise's inner sanctum, led by Kwon, who had consulted on the resort's 2017 metamorphosis from airport adjunct to aspirational idol, watched from the periphery, their clipboards talismans against the unpredictability of artistry. Elias himself had flown in from his Singapore eyrie, drawn not by metrics but by intuition. Taeyong's orbit had long fascinated him, a singularity where K-pop's kinetic fervor met the laconic depth of a Brando monologue. During a midday recess in the Sierra's lounge, amid the sizzle of truffle-infused air and the clink of reedal stems, Kwon approached unannounced, his bespoke loafers silent on the herringbone parquet. Taeyong, midway through a forkful of seared scallop, looked up, his expression a flicker of wariness veiled in warmth, the eternal dance of the observed. Mr. Kwon, he ventured, extending a hand still damp from a quick rinse, I've devoured your book on Desire's cartography. The chapter on ephemeral empires, brutal, brilliant. What ensued was no rote pleasantries but a symposium in miniature. 2 cartographers charting the unseen contours of influence. Kwon, leaning against a pillar veined with malachite, dissected the campaign's subtext. How Taeyong's gaze in the Win Your Day reel, half-lidded, horizon-hungry, evoked the sublime terror of arrival, not as conquest but communion. You're not selling paradise, Kwon murmured, his voice a baritone rumble honed in boardrooms from Dubai to Detroit. You're summoning it. In a world glutted with gloss, you remind us that true branding is vulnerability weaponized. The courage to let the audience glimpse the fracture lines. Taeyong's fork paused, the scallop forgotten. In that interstice, a current surged, electric with recognition. He had always viewed endorsements as interstitial breaths, pauses in the perpetual motion machine of idlehood. Yet here was validation not of his facade but its fissures, the humor-laced hesitations that buffered the void. Vulnerability as weapon, he echoed, a half-smile tugging like tide on shore. Sounds like a solo track waiting to happen. But what if the fracture shows too much? The crowd cheers the polish, not the patina. The exchange lingered like afterimage, seeding the keynote Kwon would deliver days later. A paean that transcended the summit's rote recitations of ROI curves and sentiment algorithms. On stage, flanked by holographic projections of Taeyong's arc, from BTS's pyretic stadium anthems to FRIND's confessional croon, Kwon wove a narrative of metamorphosis. Consider Taeyong, he intoned, the spotlight carving his features into bas-relief. A polymath who alchemizes the personal into the universal. His tenure with Paradise isn't mere alignment. It's symbiosis. Where others peddle perfection, he peddles possibility, the quiet revolution of a dimpled grin that says, join me in the mess. In branding's grand bazaar, this is heresy made holy. Authenticity not as accessory, but architecture. The words landed like precision strikes, each syllable a filament igniting the collective neural net. Whispers rippled outward. A venture capitalist in the front row tapped furiously at her tablet, while backchannel Slack threads in Silicon Valley burgeoned with speculation. Could this be the blueprint for Gen Alpha's luxury lexicon? Across the ether, the detonation was seismic. Netizens, those vigilant sentinels of the simulacrum, seized the transcript like contraband scripture, threading it through TikTok duets and Wever's soliloquies. In Jakarta's humid high-rises and New York's frost-laced lofts, Army dissected the syntax. Vulnerability weaponized. A phrase that resonated like a tuning fork struck against the ribs of fandom's fervor. Edits proliferated, layering Kwon's timbre over Taeyong's poolside reverie, slow-motion blooms of water droplets sinking to the cadence of confession. Forums fermented with fervor. One user, a branding student in Toronto, posited it as manifesto for the post-scarcity soul, where idols like Taeyong dismantled the fourth wall not with spectacle but subtlety. Another, from a dimly lit cafe in Busan, confessed how the praise pierced her own armor. He makes us believe our cracks can captivate. The viral vortex swelled, hashtags like hashtag TaeyongAlchemy and hashtag KwanonV eclipsing even the campaign's organic surge, propelling Paradise's reservations into overdrive as if the resort had become a pilgrimage site for the profane made profound. For Taeyong, ensconced in a borrowed Gangnam pied-a-terre with its panoramic indifference to the sprawl below, the aftershocks arrived in fragmented pulses, notifications pinging like distant artillery, each one a shard of scrutiny refracted back as acclaim. He scrolled in the witching hour, the screen's glow casting his features in chiaroscuro, illuminating the faint scar from a childhood tumble that no filter could efface. Kwon's words, now meme-ified and manifold, circled like satellites. Validation, yes, but laced with the vertigo of exposure. He had built bulwarks from wit and whimsy, quips that turned 12-hour shoots into anecdotal gold. But this praise excavated deeper, unearthing the etymology of his endurance. In the quiet calculus of celebrity, where every gesture was graphable metric, to be seen as architect rather than artifact was both balm and burden. A mirror held steady, reflecting not just the idol but the architect of illusions, the boy who once sketched fever dreams in notebook margins to outrun the ordinary. The ripple extended, a fractal of human hungers, illuminating the interstitial spaces of our shared spectacle. In boardrooms where algorithms dictated desire, Kwan's invocation challenged the catechism, branding as not conquest but covenant, a dialogue where the muse held veto power. For fandom's vast republic, those digital diocese of devotion, it reframed the transaction, elevating consumption to communion, where a single frame could foster fortitude. Taeyong's orbit, once a solitary ellipse, now traced constellations in collective consciousness, each note a note of empathy. The executive who paused mid-pitch to ponder her own unvarnished edges, the fan who penned a thesis on the poetics of pause in his discography. It was a quiet insurgency against the tyranny of the seamless, a reminder that in the grand bazaar of becoming, the most potent pitch was the one whispered from the wings as the summit dissolved into after-parties laced with single malt soliloquies. Elias Kwan slipped away to a rooftop terrace, the city's neon veins pulsing below like a bioluminescent reef. He lit a rare cigarette, its ember a defiant asterisk against the night, and exhaled a plume that coiled toward the stars. Taeyong's image flickered on his phone, a fresh Weverse dispatch, a candid of fog-shrouded palms at paradise, captioned with the lone ideogram. A key turning in unseen locks. Kwan smiled, faint and fractal, knowing the true endorsement was reciprocity. The boy who embodied the brand had, in turn, branded him indelible. In the end, paradise was no fixed locale but a fleeting frequency, tuned by those bold enough to broadcast their breaks. A symphony of summons, where praise was prelude to the profound unraveling of us all. As the sleet transitioned to a relentless drizzle, veiling Gangnam's glass monoliths in a patina of silver, Elias Kwan lingered on that rooftop, the cigarette's ash flaking away like discarded drafts of destiny. Below, the city thrummed with its nocturnal imperatives. Taxis slicing through puddles like yellow knives, salarymen unraveling ties in izakaya glows. But up here, in the area of abstraction, the world contracted to the pulse of a single notification. His phone vibrated once, twice. A cascade of pings from associates dissecting his keynote, their emojis a Morse code of approbation and envy. Yet it was Taeyong's Weverse echo that arrested him. The key emoji, innocuous yet insistent, a cipher for thresholds crossed. Kwan pocketed the device, grinding the butt under heel, and descended into the afterparty's gilded haze, where champagne flutes chimed like wind bells in a tempest inside. The summit had devolved into a bazaar of backslaps and business cards, the air thick with the musk of ambition and imported perfumes. Clusters of marketers huddled over tablets, replaying Kwan's clip on loop, their murmurs a polyglot hymn to disruption. He's redefining the idol archetype, from product to profit. In one alcove, a duo from LVMH dissected the semantics, one sketching fractals on a napkin to map Taeyong's vulnerability vector, the other nodding sagely over a digestif. Kwan wove through them, a Spectre and Seville Row wool, his mind replaying the lounge exchange like a film reel snagged on sprockets. Taeyong's retort, "What if the fracture shows too much?" had lingered, a barb that pricked at the underbelly of his own lexicon. For all his cartographies of craving, Kwan had mapped others' longings but skirted his own. The divorce that had left his London flat echoing with the ghosts of laughter, the daughter who texted quarterly from a Yale dorm, her replies laced with the formality of footnotes. Branding, he realized anew, was the grandest deflection, a canvas for projecting the unprojectable. Meanwhile, across the Han in a nondescript high-rise studio, Taeyong reclined on a worn leather chaise, the room a reliquary of half-formed creations, guitar necks protruding from stands like petrified lightning, lyric sheets curled at the edges from nocturnal revisions. The window framed a slice of Namsan Tower, its beacon winking through the rain like a conspirator's signal. He sipped from a mug of yuzu tea gone tepid, the steam curling upward in lazy arabesques, and refreshed his feed for the umpteenth time. Kwan's words had metastasized overnight, spawning a digital delta of discourse. Fan theories threading the phrase through tarot spreads, analysts and Forbes op-eds anointing it the Taeyong theorem for post-authentic luxury. One post from a Berlin-based curator juxtaposed it with Rilke's elegies. Here is the artist who makes the invisible visible, not by force but by fissure. Taeyong's thumb hovered, a muscle memory of restraint. He bookmarked it instead, filing it among the artifacts of his accretion, the praises that piled like cordwood against the chill of isolation, the irony coiled tight. In summoning paradise for the masses, he had become its reluctant high priest, his every inflection parsed for prophecy. Back at Paradise City, the campaign's tendrils had unfurled further. a pop-up atelier in the resort's atrium, where visitors etched fracture lines onto bespoke journals, inspired by Kwan's heresy. Reservations surged not from opulence alone but osmosis, guests seeking the subliminal thrill of proximity to his aura. Taeyong, monitoring from afar, felt the pull like tidal drag. A Weverse live stream beckoned, fans clamoring for unscripted glimpses. He hit record at midnight, the frame catching his tousled crown and the faint stubble shadowing his jaw, his voice a midnight murmur over lo-fi beats. Heard about this branding sage calling me a weapon of... What was it? Cracks. A chuckle rumbled low, self-deprecating, drawing emotes like fireflies. Truth is, we're all a bit broken porcelain. The art's in how the light sneaks through. Views spiked, hearts fractalized across time zones, but in the off-camera hush, he traced a finger along the mug's rim, wondering if the light ever reached the depths. Kwan, too, confronted the echo in his hotel suite, a minimalist expanse of slate and silk overlooking the river's serpentine gleam. He poured a finger of scotch, the liquid catching the lamplight in amber prisms, and dialed his daughter, a ritual as rote as it was rare. Her voice crackled through, laced with the cadence of cram sessions. "Dad saw your speech. That K-pop guy? Bold pivot." He laughed, a sound like gravel under tires, and relayed the lounge vignette, Taeyong's query about fractures hanging between them like an unsent postcard. "Makes you think," she mused, "about the masks we all wear. Yours is the suit, his the spotlight." The call ended with perfunctory "I love yous," but the seed took root. Vulnerability, weaponized, was no solitary blade but a shared arsenal, forging bonds from the forge of exposure and the days that followed. The convergence crested like a wave held in abeyance. Paradise hosted a clandestine salon for influencers, Kwan moderating a panel where Taeyong appeared via hologram, his projection shimmering like a djinn summoned from ether, fielding queries with the poise of a fencer parrying phantoms. "Authenticity isn't absence of edit," he posited, the audience leaning in as if inhaling incense. "It's the edit we choose to reveal." Kwan, from the wings, watched the alchemy unfold. Executives nodding like converts, netizens live-tweeting epiphanies that trended under #FractureFrequency. It was a microcosm of the larger unraveling, the way praise, once a pedestal, became a platform for plummet and rise, inviting the world to witness not worship, but witness. As January's frost-etched filigree on window panes, the duo reconvened, not in summits or studios, but a quiet tea-house in Itaewon, where steam from cast-iron kettles blurred the boundaries of sight. Kwan arrived first, shedding his overcoat like an exoskeleton. Taeyong slipped in moments later, scarf wound against the bite, his eyes alight with the residue of a dawn vocal booth. Over bowls of patbingsu melting into rosy pools, they traded not stratagems but stories. Kwan's early days hawking knockoff watches in Kowloon markets, Taeyong's boyhood sketches of impossible cities. "Your words," the younger man admitted, spoon pausing midair. "They made the mess feel monumental." Kwan inclined his head, the gray at his temples catching the lantern's glow. "And yours make the monumental human. That's the real brand, Taeyong. The one that outlives the logos." Their parting was unmarked by fanfare, just a nod across the threshold into the snow-dusted dusk. Yet in the interstices, the feeds that fermented their dialogue, the fans who forged fan art from its embers, the brands that benchmarked against its blueprint, the resonance endured. It was a testament to the tender tyranny of acclaim, how a single summons could shatter solitudes, weaving individual aches into a communal tapestry. In the grand narrative of becoming, where idols and influencers alike navigated the narrows between facade and fire, Taeyong's orbit had expanded not through conquest but confluence, a reminder that the most enduring endorsements were those etched not in ink, but in the indelible inkling of shared imperfection. And now, as we linger in the afterglow of this unfolding saga, let's turn the lens outward, to you, the unseen architects of these echoes. In the comments below, what fracture in your own story has become your fiercest light? Share a moment when praise cracked you open, or a public figure whose words reframed your hidden hues. Be it Taeyong's quiet confessions or Kwan's bold blueprints. Tag a friend who needs this reminder, drop your favorite #FractureFrequency edit, and let's build a thread that rivals the summit symposiums. Your voices aren't just replies, they're the next chapter. Hit like if this tale tuned your frequency, subscribe for more dispatches from the edge of empire and empathy, Because in this digital delta, we're all summoning something sacred. Bellon, stay resonant. Until the next unraveling, grateful for your gaze. Purple Heart.